Hey everyone, this is Keith Scott from out in Sydney, Australia. I'm one of the voices of Bullwinkle J. Moose. It's time to watch Relentless and Unstoppable. And so give it up for your main hosts, Douglas Kenny and Andy McPhee.
Hey everybody, this is Doug Kenny and welcome to Relentless and Unstoppable. We have another amazing guest coming on the channel today, so please hit like and subscribe. And after this episode, please stay tuned to the RNU channel for more amazing guests. Let's get this on!
Hey everybody, how you doing? Just a quick little share of why I started Relentless and Unstoppable. It was for one very simple reason, because of Doug Kenny. Nothing to do with me at all, zero. I was just coaching Doug, and he took on the coaching and mentoring, and he made all the changes. He took all the suggestions from his parents as well as my coaching, but it was all about Doug, his breakthrough and his weight loss, his willingness to accept that he is dealing with high functioning autism and other issues, but he's never quit, he's never given up. So we did one interview with him to share his story, and then we decided to start interviewing other people. And Doug has now taken over the whole channel, and he does all the interviews, he runs everything. He's just an amazing young man. So RNU was born from simply what an amazing young man Doug is, and his story needed to be shared.
That's amazing. Dolphins are so cute, aren't they?
They are.
Their chirping sound always gets to me. I remember riding a boat near off the coast of San Diego, and the dolphins would like jump out of the water along with the ship, almost like they were surfing, and you could hear the chirping, and it's just a beautiful sound, you know?
It is, definitely.
Yeah. What are your hopes for the future?
My hopes for the future is that there's more inclusion instead of exclusion, that there's also more awareness in schools too, about the autism spectrum and how the children should be treated, not differently, but just know and be aware that this person doesn't necessarily think the same as you. And nobody in the world thinks the same as other people. You know what I mean? But I just know that there's been a lot of bullying and harassment going on in schools. And so that's the next step for us, is that I'm going to try to get on a committee to speak out against violence and bullying in schools for disabled children and children on the spectrum.
You know what else you need to do, and what I need to do as well with my anti-bullying campaign I run on YouTube? You know what the world really needs to do for that matter?
What?
Stop the zero tolerance policies in school.
Yeah.
Because, in zero tolerance, they don't just punish the bully, they punish the victim. And it's just ridiculous when you think about it. It's like, and I've said this before because I was the victim of that in school as well. Like, I reported bullying and I got suspended for 3 days because of zero tolerance, and I even said this to the school at the time. I was telling them, it's no different than someone stealing your car to go rob a bank. And because it's your car, you get arrested. Makes no sense. Right. You know what I mean? It makes no sense. And they say that the reason why they do that, is because they say it's because they want to be fair to everyone, but we know that's not the case. They're concerned that if they punish the actual bully, that they'll be sued, or if they investigate it the way that they're supposed to, it'll expose that they may have known about the person's behavior but didn't do anything. It's all about protecting their brand, not helping the bully and not helping the victim.
Yeah. And on top of that, with it, it's excluding even more instead of inclusion. You're not allowing people to stand up for themselves. You're excluding them and treating them like they've done some type of crime, instead of saying, okay, well, what is a plan of action we could do to make you feel safer?
I'm not against self-defense. I mean, of course, I do agree with schools that they have to not allow it to a certain level. But I am a firm believer in self-defense. But in my case, I think that self-defense is where you just slap someone, punch someone, or push someone only once just for the purpose of getting them away from you, and then you just run away.
Right.
But you can't just beat someone senseless and then say it's self-defense. I understand that
Exactly.
this, I understand that the school has limits on that, but the problem is they're not doing anything to help the situation. They're just too punitive. They're not give I mean, suspensions, do have to happen sometimes, but if you suspend a kid and don't give them resources on what they can do to help and avoid the situation in the future, then who's helping them out?
Right.
You know? So yeah, they need to stop the zero tolerance. And, sometimes schools even need to, schools sometimes even just need to admit when they've made a mistake, and they forget, that when a family or when they forget that when a family leaves their kid or their children in the care of the school, that they're supposed to be responsible for them, and responsible doesn't mean that they take responsibility for the students' actions. This is the way I'll put it. For example, you'd probably agree with this, but the Columbine disaster in Colorado, when those two teens shot up the school, it's the same way with the schools, in my opinion, when they accept students. But what I'm getting at is, so yeah, the Columbine disaster in 1999, right?
Yeah.
When all the people were saying, that the parents were ultimately responsible for the aftermath of the tragedy and all that, they weren't saying that the parents of Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris made their kids directly do what they did. They said that they're responsible because as the parents, they hold the responsibility of raising them, and taking care of them and making sure that they're being raised the way that they're supposed to. And that's why they faced a lot of the consequences when the tragedy happened. People are not saying that they made them do what they did. They hold responsibility because they were the ones that held the responsibility of looking after them. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's the same with schools, schools hold the responsibility, of making sure that the kids are looked after. And so if bullying happens, technically the school has to take responsibility for it because they weren't properly looking out for everyone. They can't just always
Right.
blame it on the students.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I wish you luck in what you're doing. I hope that you can raise awareness on the zero tolerance stuff as well.
Thanks. Yeah. I'll do my best. We'll see what we can do. But I also, ran into a problem with my son's school. The last day before fall break, they told my son that there'd be a water slide at the school,
Mhm.
for the last day of school before fall break. And I was like, oh, that sounds nice. And they're like, go ahead and pack, some stuff for your kids so that they can go on the water slide. And then the day before that night, I got a message saying that all the kids that have IEPs are excluded from the water slide, and that only the kids who don't have IEPs are allowed to go on the water slide. And I was like, that's not fair. I was like, if anything, you should have a kiddie pool or some other activity that they can do that's water related, that's still safer for them if you feel like the water slide is. And they're like, oh, my apologies. It's up to the administration. It's not up to us.
Yeah.
And that really upset me, and I couldn't tell my son. And then my son comes back from school that day and says, oh, I didn't get to go on the water slide because I got in trouble last month. And I'm like, that's not the reason. And why would the teachers tell him that to confuse him and make him feel even worse about himself? Like, there should be another way to be able to explain it to him. I shouldn't have to be the bearer of bad news if the school is going to exclude him,
Yeah.
you know?
And from what I understand, other schools act the same way. But, it'll take time. I'm sure they'll eventually find a plan for that kind of stuff. But,
Yeah.
the way I look at it, and this is just my opinion, I think that sometimes in the rare circumstances, I think that there needs to be more people in schools, not just teachers and families and children. But I think that sometimes families, with all the school shootings and with all the bullying,
Mhm.
sometimes I think that people just need to have the balls and say, if you're not going to take care of my kid the way that you're supposed to, we're not going to come to school. And
Right.
the schools, they won't care if they lose one kid or two kids, but if they can lose like maybe 75% of their students, that might raise the
Mhm.
message that we're serious about this.
Yeah.
So I think there needs to be more people like that can just stand up for themselves and not even be prosecuted if they do that, because skipping school can lead to prosecution. But
Mhm.
but even if it does, if you have reasons for what you're doing and you can defend yourself from it, then it may work.
Right.
So yeah, but yeah, I wish you luck and all that. And what are your hopes for the future?
My hopes for the future is that there is no bullying in schools, period, not just towards children with disabilities or children on the spectrum, but all around in general. Um, I hope that people are trained more so to understand people on the spectrum and be able to have jobs for them for the future, be able to have more understanding with kids, especially, and have more events open. I mean, some hotels are like, oh no, if your kid's like that, then like we can't service them. Or have more exclusion in restaurants too. Have like a calming corner for, for children on the spectrum. Have grocery stores, have sensory friendly hours. My son hates going to the grocery store because it's too much people, too much noise. He can't focus. It's all over the place. And he doesn't like headphones either. And so I'm like, well, I have to drop him off at a babysitter and go grocery shopping, you know. So I just hope that there's more inclusion in the future.
Yeah, for sure. I hope that gets to that point as well, and I hope your son will get to a point where all that stuff won't bother him as much.
Yeah.
So where can people find you?
I'm mainly on Facebook. If you search up my full name, Danya, last name Woodhams, you can find me on Facebook.
All righty, sounds good. So this is my final question. How can your journey impact millions of people?
It's starting small now, but in the future, I think the journey can impact people with learning patience and understanding. That's the main thing to have with people on the spectrum is patience.
Yeah, for sure. All right, that's all we have for now, but we thank you for coming on.
All right, thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Yep, you too. So everyone, please check out Danya on her Facebook. Please hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week for the next episode of RNU.
Gee, that's all we have for Relentless and Unstoppable. So tune into the next episode to hear more amazing stories from amazing guests. This is Keith Scott from Sydney, Australia saying so long, and I'm smarter than the average bear. Gee.